Hello and welcome back to another sit down video. This one I have been very excited to film and I have been thinking about it for a very long time, and I'm excited to finally share with you the 20 books that I want to read before I turn 20. I'm 18 years old right now and I'm filming this in June. So I have about 1.5 years to read these 20 books before I turn 20. And I thought that this video would make more sense right after I turned 19, but I realized that I'm not going to put that kind of pressure on myself to read these specific 20 books in 1 year. Some years I don't even read 20 books. And of course I definitely don't think I'm going to end up reading all of these, especially since some of these are series and some of them I just wanted to put on this list because I want that extra motivation to get me to try and read these books. But I know that there's definitely other books that might pique my interest and take priority over this very long period of time. Normally I print these things, but I'm going to be using my laptop, which is at 1%. So hopefully, even though it's charging, it doesn't die. I think that a lot of people have already read these books, and I think that you'll notice a trend of a lot of these books are usually read at like a younger age, but I didn't get into reading until I was almost at the end of my high school experience, and so I missed out on a lot of books that are super popular that I just never got around to reading because I was never into reading when I was the audience for that book, and I still want to give them a chance. So without further ado, the 20 books. So the very first book is actually going to be a series, and that is finishing the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. And I know I'm going to have no problem finishing this by the time I turn 20 because I am already on Heir of Fire and I am in love with the series. I honestly love it more than ACOTAR, and I have been wanting to read this series for so long. Before I finished the ACOTAR series, I was like, I'm going to read Throne of Glass. And 2 years later, I started the series, and I am so excited to finally understand this huge piece of Sarah J. Maas's world. And there's so much fun content on the internet regarding these characters, and I just cannot wait to be a part of that community. The second book is very different, and I think a lot of people read this in high school. I don't know about Canadian high schools. I feel like this might be more of an American thing, but I'm totally just making that up. I actually want to try reading Lord of the Flies by William Golding. So this is probably going to come as quite a surprise to people who know me in real life. This is definitely not something I would normally reach for, and I'm kind of scared that I am not going to read this before I turn 20 or ever at all. But I just think it's such a classic book that a lot of people just have read, and it's just like a necessary experience, and the premise doesn't sound that bad, and yeah, it honestly intrigues me and I want to be a part of that conversation. So Lord of the Flies, we'll see if I get around to that. The third book I was definitely very hesitant to put on this list, and it's honestly quite controversial, especially with the movie coming out now. It's even a bigger conversation than it was before, and that's It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. It goes without saying that Colleen Hoover has definitely taken over the internet, and her books are always #1 on all the charts, and she has been on the New York Times best-selling list forever, and she mostly writes romance, but she also writes thrillers and other books too. So I know that she has a huge arsenal of books, but I would say that one of her most popular books is It Ends With Us, and I have definitely been spoiled for the whole book because it is just such a huge piece of pop culture today. I didn't think I was ever going to read a Colleen Hoover book because they just didn't seem like my vibe, and even though everyone was talking about them, I didn't really feel FOMO. And I think there's two sides of the spectrum, and that's people that love Colleen Hoover and people who hate Colleen Hoover. And then one of my lovely friends bought me It Ends With Us, I would say like a year, maybe a year and a half ago, and I was so excited about it because everyone was talking about it, but it hadn't become quite controversial yet, and I kind of wish that I had read it then when I hadn't been spoiled for it. But I do own the book, so I do think that I might as well just read it. I know that this is not what people expect, it's not like a fluffy romance. I'm just kind of curious as to what the hype's all about, and I already know what this book is about and why there's a lot of problems, but also I understand that it's based on her real life, so I'd just be kind of curious, and yeah. The fourth one is another book that was really trendy quite a while ago, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And honestly, the book just sounds super glamorous, old Hollywood, and I just kind of love that vibe, and I think that it's a book that I might genuinely enjoy, and it's also definitely a very big part of the internet right now. Next book is Remarkably Bright Creature. This is by Shelby Van Pelt, and what I know about this is I'm pretty sure it's written from the perspective of an octopus and a like night shift kind of aquarium employee. And first of all, yes. And honestly, that's all I know about it, but also I see a lot of educators read it, and so I'm kind of curious as to what that's about. And it just seems like a book that's a little out of my comfort zone, but also one that I probably am gonna end up enjoying, so throwing that on there. I have read a few thrillers, and honestly, I've not liked most of them, but there are some that I have absolutely been obsessed with. So I threw on what I thought was a thriller classic that everyone pretty much has read except for me, and that is The Silent Patient by Alex McLeod. I think that's his last name. And yeah, I think it's like a patient who can't speak or something, and or maybe in an asylum, I'm not sure. But apparently there's a really good twist, and it's been recommended to me about 100 times, and it's about time that I get on this train and just experience one of the thriller classics. Also on this list is a book that my mom owns, so I can definitely just steal it from her. So that's The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. And I read Circe and I enjoyed it. I wasn't obsessed with it, but it was a good time. And this one has a similar-ish tone. We're still in that like Greek god world. I think that it's honestly just a classic at this point. And honestly, I was more interested in The Song of Achilles than Circe, but then I read Circe first. So yeah, I feel like it's time that I read it. Next is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings, and I think this is often sold as a romance, but I know that it's definitely not, and I just know that this is a cult classic and a lot of people's most favorite books ever. I know that you either love it or you hate it, and I'm all about feeling passionately about something, even if it's pure hatred or like you're in love with it, that you will literally take a bullet for this book. And I want to feel a type of way about this book, so I hopefully will get to that. So the next book is something I 100% am going to read because I own the book and I've owned it for a while. I actually got it for my birthday from Eli because it had been on my want to read, and he stalked my Goodreads and just bought me a book for my want to read, and that was super sweet, and I still haven't read it. Sorry, Eli. But I know that the second book just came out. I don't know if there's going to be a book after that or if it's just a duology, but I know that everyone loves it and I want to love it too. And that is Legend Born by Tracy Dion. This is a fantasy novel, and surprisingly there's not been a lot of fantasy novels on here, just because like, I don't know, I feel like I've read a lot of the classic fantasy novels already, and I know I will continue to read them throughout the rest of my life. And I don't need any extra motivation when it comes to fantasy. And I'm just super excited to read this book. I couldn't tell you anything about the premise. No, I did not research this ahead of time, but it's on my shelf and I'm sure I'll give a review of it soon. Alright, the next book I found out about recently, and that is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. And I recently read one of his books, which was Survive the Night, and I loved it. And I got that at like a second-hand bookstore. And I was actually looking for The House Across the Lake, but I was like, this is Riley Sager, so I'll just get it anyways. And I ended up talking about that in the Reading 3 Thrillers video. And it was so good. I read it in like 2 days. It was amazing. And I think I honestly just loved it so much because I was reading it like at night, like super late. And that just seems to make things better. I'm very interested to read The House Across the Lake because generally people say it's even better than Survive the Night. And in fact, most people, I think the average rating of Survive the Night is 3 stars on Goodreads, which really surprised me. Apparently it gets even better than that. We'll see. I just want to read more of his books because I really struggle to find thrillers that are like my vibe. And so I think he might be my vibe. But I'm hoping maybe to do just a video just on Riley Sager. So, okay, the next book is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. And this was a really popular book, even before the cozy fantasy became a huge trend. It just sounds like such a relaxing read, and I really want to read it in late winter time. I don't know if now is like it's really the moment for Legends and Lattes, but definitely in the winter I just want to get cozy with like a blanket and some coffee and just read Legends and Lattes, because I think that sometimes, you know, we don't need to have a war to have a great plot, you know? So sometimes it's just fun to read about people owning a coffee shop and mythical creatures. We are at number 12, and the 12th book that I want to read before I'm 20 is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Jarmus. So I feel like this book is about feminism and this chemist, and it's actually a really sad, emotional book. And to me, I'm just like, yes. And I love reading about women who are in science, especially I think this is like takes place in the past quite far, but I'm not 100% sure. And I think that like I usually read about these types of women in like fluffy settings, and I think that this is going to be a little different, and I really respect that, and I want to be a part of that. So I'm excited to read that. I also want, I think it's the UK cover, but that thing is so cool looking, and I feel like, how do I get my hands on this? I don't know, but I will find a way. So I don't know if this is cheating, but my 13th book is kind of like an option. So I either want to read The Long Walk or Billy Summers by Stephen King. And basically with this 13th book, I'm just wanting to read a Stephen King book, and these are just two books that like I have access to already and that I thought were interesting. I just want to understand the Stephen King hype. I don't think that he's ever gonna be my like favorite author or anything, because I'm not really obsessed with horror, but I know that he writes other books besides horror, and so I want to see if those are kind of interesting. And I know that people just say he's an absolute genius and he just writes books like crazy, and I feel like I'm the only one who hasn't read a Stephen King book, because I feel like once you do, you like love him, and I know my dad loves him, and this can just be another topic of conversation for us. Okay, number 14 is a book that everyone has read except for me, and that is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. So yes, I've already seen the movies, and yes, I missed the middle school or the high school like hype when everyone was reading these books, but I still want to read them because now I'm into reading, and I think that it's like such a classic. And honestly, what really pushed me to like want to read this was, I think, Serpent and Snakes, or Songbirds and Snakes, whatever. The one about President Snow just came out, and people are really raving about that, and I just realized, I was like, I have literally not read The Hunger Games, and like, why is that? And I think that this would be a fun book to try and find at one of those secondhand bookstores and just have like as like a chill read, because obviously like I know the gist of what happens. So yeah, and I'm sure it's just a great book, and I think that that would be a fun little experiment and a fun little experience. The next book has been on my TBR for an extremely long time, and I thought I'd put it on this list to give me a little extra push to read it. And honestly, I'm just intimidated by the size, and that is Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. And I put her on this list again because I just think her books are just such like an essential piece to like the fantasy book community. And I know now that like Crescent City is gonna bring in some of her other work, and I just like really need to be a part of that. And like it's just hard to get motivated because everyone's like, it's so slow in the beginning, it's so long. I've been reading a lot of really long books recently, and so I just feel like I've been not reading that many books lately just because they're all so long. But I really need to get on this, and hopefully I'll start that after the front of class. Okay, number 16 is The House in the Cerulean Sea. This is by TJ Klune, and I couldn't tell you much about this book, just that like it's been on my radar for a while and it's on this list. Number 17, I also couldn't tell you much about it. I just know that it just seems to be everywhere, and that is 11 Other Words by Christina Lauren. And I do believe that this got turned into a TV show or a movie, and I just think it's a cute little romance and something good to get me through the summer. And so hopefully it's a good book. again, it's just on this list. I couldn't tell you that much more. But number 18 is one that I'm really hoping that I do get to, and that's Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. My mom has owned these books for a very long time, and so now they're kind of there, and I started Twilight like 4 years ago, and I just never finished it. And I've watched the movies like a billion times because we have them on DVD. I just feel like I need to read the books, otherwise I'm not a true fan, and I think it would make a really fun video too. However, I do not think I will ever read Midnight Sun, ever, because it might ruin it for me. I feel like a lot of people also got to read this in like middle school, early high school, that kind of period. I knew it was really big in my grade 7 class, and I really wanted to talk about the books, but all I could talk about were the movies. Number 19 is Caraba by Stephanie Garber, and I did actually read the first page of this book, so I've already made progress. But I think that this book was supposed to be a standalone, so it has like a clean ending, but there are 2 books that follow it. But mostly I want to read this book because I want to read Once Upon a Broken Heart, and most people think it's even better. It's written by the same author and is in the same world, but I've heard it's a little confusing if you don't already understand the world, so I'm hoping to just read Caraval and then be able to read Once Upon a Broken Heart and just like be less confused, you know? And then maybe I love it so much that I can continue the series, and it's just another great fantasy series. Finally, number 20 is actually one book, but if I like it, there's 20 more. So that is City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. And I went to my grandma's house for Christmas this year, and she handed me a box and asked if I wanted these, and she found them at the thrift store, and it was the entire Mortal Instruments series. So City of Bones, City of Glass, City of Ashes, City of Fallen Angels, Lost Souls, and City of Heavenly Fire. And then there's tons of series after that that kind of connect to this world. And I heard that this one she does recommend you start with, but you only read the first 3 books and then you kind of pause to read a different book, because it kind of, the trilogy kind of ends clean, and then she writes 3 more books where there's like a different issue going on in the world. But I know that her books are super popular, and it's just another big like world, the Shadowhunter world, that I can get into, and I'm really excited. I've been watching a lot of people talk about the correct way to read all of her books and about different reviews and different thoughts, and it's just got me really excited to read the series. So hopefully I can at least start it and start the first book before I turn 20. So kind of feels crazy to say that. Those are all 20 of the books that I hopefully want to get to before I turn 20, and I'm super excited about all of them, and I know I won't read them all, but I hope that I can at least make a video when I turn 20 that like where I can proudly say that I did read a large chunk of them. That is going to be all. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you in another vlog very soon. Bye!